There's a question that haunts every human soul in moments of deep pain. Why me? Why this? Why now? I've sat with this question through decades of spiritual seeking, through the loss of loved ones, through the humbling stroke that changed everything I thought I knew about myself. And what I've discovered is that suffering isn't the enemy we think it is. It's often our greatest teacher, our most profound doorway to awakening. In the East, they speak of karma not as punishment, but as the compassionate universe offering us exactly what we need to grow. Every moment of pain carries within it the seeds of wisdom. Every experience of loss opens us to deeper love. The suffering that feels so personal, so unfair, so unbearable, it's actually the curriculum your soul chose to help you remember who you really are. The path through suffering isn't around it or over it, it's straight through the heart of it, with love as your guide. When I first encountered real suffering, not the intellectual kind I studied in psychology textbooks, but the gut-wrenching, soul-shattering kind that leaves you gasping for breath, I thought it was evidence that life was fundamentally broken. I was wrong. What I discovered, through years of meditation, through sitting with dying friends, through my own journey with stroke and aging, is that our wounds are actually sacred openings. There's an ancient Japanese art called kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold. The cracks aren't hidden, they're highlighted, made beautiful, turned into the most precious part of the piece. This is what happens to us when we stop running from our pain and start honoring it as sacred. The places where we've been broken become the places where light shines through most brilliantly. I remember sitting with a woman who had lost her child in a car accident. She was drowning in grief, asking me how a loving God could allow such horror. I didn't have an answer that would take away her pain, and I wouldn't have given one if I did. Instead, I sat with her in the mystery of it all. What emerged over months of sitting together was something extraordinary. Her capacity for compassion had become infinite. She could meet another grieving parent with a presence that was almost otherworldly. Her wound had become her gift. This isn't about romanticizing suffering or pretending that pain is always pleasant. It's about recognizing that our deepest wounds often crack us open in ways that reveal our true nature. Before my stroke, I was attached to being the spiritual teacher, the one who had it all figured out. The stroke stripped away that identity and left me with something more precious: vulnerability, humility, and a deeper capacity to love. The sacred wound teaches us that we're not separate from suffering. We're not victims of a cruel universe. We're participants in a mysterious dance of consciousness that uses every experience, including the most painful ones, to wake us up. When we can hold our pain with the same tenderness we would show a beloved child, something alchemical happens. This understanding has sustained me through my own most difficult periods. When I was struggling with the effects of my stroke, feeling frustrated and limited, I had to remember that even in my diminished state, I was still part of this beautiful web of mutual support. Other people were walking me home through their patience, their love, their willingness to help. And somehow, even in my struggle, I was still walking others home through my example of how to meet difficulty with grace. The phrase, walking each other home, also recognizes that this life is not our final destination. We're all temporary visitors in these bodies, in this world, in this experience of separation. Eventually, we'll all return to the unified consciousness from which we came. But while we're here, we can make the journey more beautiful by traveling together, by supporting each other, by sharing our love and wisdom along the way. This doesn't mean we should cling to each other or try to prevent anyone from completing their journey. Sometimes walking someone home means letting them go when it's time for them to transition. Sometimes it means holding space for someone's death with the same presence we would offer to their life. Sometimes it means celebrating when someone finds their way to a deeper understanding, even if it means they no longer need our support. The ultimate recognition is that we're all expressions of the same divine consciousness, temporarily forgetting our unity so we can experience the joy of love. Every person we meet is another aspect of ourselves, another face of the same infinite being that we truly are. When we serve others, we're serving ourselves. When we love others, we're loving ourselves. When we walk others home, we're walking ourselves home. After 8 decades of life, after all the seeking and finding and losing and seeking again, I'm left with this simple truth. Love is the only thing that matters. Not the sentimental kind of love that depends on circumstances, but the unconditional love that recognizes itself in every form. This love doesn't depend on whether someone is worthy or deserving. It doesn't depend on whether they love us back. It simply is, like the sun that shines on everyone equally. Suffering and karma, pain and healing, service and transformation, all of it is ultimately about love learning to recognize itself. Every difficult experience is love in disguise, offering us the opportunity to choose love over fear, connection over separation, service over selfishness. Every person we meet is love in a different costume, playing a different role in the cosmic drama of consciousness awakening to itself. The journey home isn't about going somewhere else. It's about recognizing that we're already here, already whole, already loved beyond measure. We're already home. We just forgot for a while so we could experience the joy of remembering. And in this remembering, we discover that we were never really separate from each other or from the source of all love. We're all just walking each other home, and the destination is the recognition that we never actually left home in the first place. The path is love, the journey is love, the destination is love, everything else is just scenery along the way. The suffering doesn't disappear, but it transforms into compassion, into wisdom, into a deeper understanding of what it means to be human. Now let me tell you something that might sound strange. Karma isn't what most people think it is. We've been taught to see karma as some cosmic accounting system, where good deeds earn points and bad deeds get punished. But this understanding misses the profound love that karma actually represents. Karma is the universe's way of offering us exactly what we need for our spiritual growth. It's not punishment, it's curriculum. Every situation we encounter, every person we meet, every challenge we face, it's all perfectly designed to help us evolve. The drunk driver who caused the accident isn't an agent of evil. They're playing a role in a cosmic drama that's ultimately about love finding its way back to itself. I know this sounds impossible when you're in the middle of intense suffering. When I was lying in the hospital after my stroke, unable to speak clearly, watching my identity as an articulate teacher crumble, it didn't feel like love. It felt like cosmic cruelty. But as I learned to be present with what was happening rather than fighting it, I began to see the gift hidden in the devastation. The stroke forced me to let go of my attachment to being the one who had answers. It taught me to receive love instead of always giving it. It showed me that my value wasn't tied to my ability to perform or teach or be spiritually impressive. The karma of that experience was profoundly compassionate. It was offering me the chance to discover who I was beyond all my roles and identities. This doesn't mean we should passively accept harm or injustice. It means we can respond to life's challenges from a place of understanding rather than reactivity. When we see karma as compassion, we stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this here to teach me?" The first question makes us victims. The second makes us students. I've watched people transform their relationship to the most difficult experiences through this understanding. A man who was sexually abused as a child discovered that his wound became his pathway to helping other survivors. A woman who struggled with addiction found that her recovery journey became her greatest gift to others still trapped in that hell. Their karma wasn't cruel. It was preparing them for their highest service. The compassionate nature of karma doesn't minimize the reality of pain. It doesn't make suffering less real or less difficult, But it does offer us a framework for understanding our experiences that empowers rather than diminishes us. When we see our challenges as opportunities for growth rather than evidence of cosmic unfairness, we can meet them with curiosity instead of resistance. But here's where it gets tricky. The mind loves to create stories about our suffering. It wants to make sense of pain, to find someone to blame, to construct a narrative that explains why we're the victim and they're the perpetrator. These stories feel important. They seem to give our suffering meaning and purpose. But more often than not, they become prisons that keep us trapped in the very suffering we're trying to escape. I spent years telling myself a story about my stroke. It was about loss, about unfairness, about all the teaching I wouldn't be able to do. The story made me feel sorry for myself, which felt oddly comforting. But it also kept me stuck in a victim identity that had nothing to do with my true nature. The ego loves suffering because suffering confirms its existence. When we're in pain, we feel very real, very solid, very much like a separate self that's been wronged by the world. The ego feeds on this drama. It creates elaborate narratives about who hurt us, why they were wrong, how we've been mistreated. These stories give us a sense of identity and purpose, even if that identity is as a victim. But here's what I learned. The story of suffering is never the whole truth. It's just one layer of a much deeper reality. When we get caught in the story, we miss the deeper invitation that our pain is offering us. We become so busy being the hero or victim of our personal drama that we forget we're actually playing a role in a much grander story, the story of consciousness waking up to itself. The mind's stories about suffering usually follow predictable patterns. There's the story of the innocent victim, I didn't deserve this. There's the story of the righteous victim, they had no right to treat me this way. There's the story of the special victim, no one has ever suffered like I have. All of these stories have one thing in common. They keep us separate from our experience and from others. When I caught myself telling these stories about my stroke, I realized I had a choice. I could keep reinforcing the narrative of Ram Dass the victim, or I could get curious about what was actually happening beneath the story. What I found was something much more interesting and a tale of personal tragedy. I found an opportunity to explore identity itself, to discover what remained when everything I thought I was had been stripped away. The stories we tell about our suffering aren't inherently bad or wrong. They're natural responses to pain, ways the mind tries to make sense of chaos. But when we mistake these stories for absolute truth, we limit our capacity to grow from our experiences. We become characters in a play of our own making, forgetting that we're also the author who can rewrite the script at any moment. The invitation isn't to deny our pain or pretend it doesn't matter. It's to hold our stories lightly, to recognize them as just one way of interpreting our experience. When we can step back from the drama of our personal narrative, we create space for something deeper to emerge, a recognition of the timeless awareness that witnesses all stories without being trapped by any of them. The Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron once said that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. For years, I thought this was just spiritual bypassing, a way of minimizing the reality of human anguish. But through my own encounters with profound discomfort, I've come to understand the profound truth hidden in these words. Pain is what happens. Suffering is what we add to what happens through our resistance, our stories, our desperate attempts to make the pain go away. When the stroke hit me, the initial pain was just neurons misfiring, blood vessels blocked, brain tissue dying. That was the pain, raw, biological, unavoidable. But the suffering that followed was entirely different. It was my resistance to what was happening, my grief over who I thought I was supposed to be, my terror of a future I couldn't control. The suffering was pain multiplied by my refusal to accept what was. Learning to meet pain with presence isn't about becoming passive or pretending that difficult experiences don't matter. It's about discovering that we have a choice in how we relate to whatever arises. When we can sit with discomfort without immediately trying to fix it, change it, or escape from it, something remarkable happens. The pain remains, but the struggle against it dissolves. And in that dissolution, we discover a space of profound peace that exists independent of our circumstances. I learned this lesson most powerfully while sitting with my friend who was dying of AIDS. In those early days of the epidemic, before effective treatments existed, watching young, vibrant people waste away was almost unbearable. My instinct was to do something, to fix the situation, to make the pain go away. But what I discovered was that my attempts to avoid the reality of his suffering were actually adding to it. When I could simply be present with what was happening, without trying to change it, without offering false hope, without turning away, a different kind of healing became possible. The presence I'm talking about isn't passive. It's actively choosing to remain open to whatever is arising, even when it's uncomfortable. It's like learning to breathe underwater. At first it feels impossible, but gradually you discover that you can actually We survive in this new element. When we stop fighting our pain and start breathing with it, we find that we're much more resilient than we ever imagined. This practice of meeting pain with presence has to be learned gradually, like developing a muscle. You start with small discomforts, the frustration of being stuck in traffic, the irritation of a difficult conversation, the anxiety of an uncertain situation. Instead of immediately reacting, you practice just being with what's arising. You feel the sensations in your body, notice the thoughts in your mind, observe the emotions moving through you, but you don't immediately act on any of it. What you discover through this practice is that most of our suffering comes from our relationship to our experience, not from the experience itself. When we can change our relationship to pain, when we can meet it with curiosity instead of resistance, with gentleness instead of harshness, we find that we're capable of holding much more than we ever thought possible. Every difficult experience is like a seed that contains within it the potential for tremendous growth. But seeds need the right conditions to sprout. They need darkness, pressure, and time. Our souls are similar. They ripen through the pressure of challenging experiences, through the darkness of not knowing, through the slow passage of time that allows wisdom to emerge. Before my stroke, I thought I was pretty spiritually mature. I had written books, given thousands of talks, spent years in meditation. I felt like I had graduated from the school of spiritual seeking. But the stroke humbled me completely. It showed me that spiritual maturity isn't about having all the answers or being beyond suffering. It's about being willing to be a beginner again and again, to let each experience teach you something new about the nature of existence. The ripening process isn't comfortable. Just as fruit must go through stages of growing, changing, and eventually surrendering to its own sweetness, our souls must go through periods of confusion, loss, and transformation. The experiences that ripen us most are often the ones we would never choose for ourselves. They're the losses that break our hearts open, the failures that shatter our self-image, the betrayals that force us to question everything we thought we knew about trust and love. I've watched this ripening process in countless people over the years. A mother whose child dies in a car accident discovers a depth of compassion she never knew existed. A man whose business fails learns to find his worth in something deeper than external success. A woman whose husband leaves her after 30 years of marriage discovers her own strength and independence. These aren't consolation prizes for terrible experiences. They're the genuine gifts that emerge when we allow our difficulties to transform us rather than simply traumatize us. The ripening of the soul requires a kind of patience that goes against everything our culture teaches us. We want quick fixes, immediate relief, instant transformation, but consciousness doesn't arc that way. It unfolds in its own time, according to its own mysterious wisdom. Our job isn't to force the process or to understand it completely. Our job is to cooperate with it, to remain open to whatever is trying to emerge through our experience. This doesn't mean we should seek out suffering or glorify painful experiences. It means we can learn to work with whatever arises as compost for our growth. The disappointments, the losses, the betrayals, the failures, all of it can become fertile ground for developing qualities like patience, humility, compassion, and wisdom. But only if we're willing to let these experiences change us rather than simply endure them. There's an ancient practice in many spiritual traditions called turning poison into medicine. It's based on the understanding that our greatest wounds often become our greatest sources of healing power. The areas where we've been most broken are precisely the places where we can offer the most authentic help to others who are struggling with similar challenges. This alchemical transformation doesn't happen automatically. It requires conscious participation. We have to be willing to dive deeply into our own healing process, to understand our patterns, to work with our triggers, to develop genuine compassion for our own journey. And then we have to be willing to share what we've learned, not from a place of having it all figured out, but from a place of ongoing discovery. I've seen this transformation happen countless times. The person who struggles with addiction becomes a powerful sponsor for others trying to get sober. The woman who survives abuse becomes a fierce advocate for other survivors. The man who loses his child becomes a source of comfort for other grieving parents. Their wounds don't disappear. They become doorways through which love and healing can flow. The key to this transformation is recognizing that our personal pain connects us to the universal human experience. When we can see our struggles as part of the larger tapestry of human suffering, we stop feeling so alone and isolated. We begin to understand that our individual healing contributes to the healing of the collective. This process requires tremendous courage. It means being willing to feel our pain fully, to understand its roots, to work with it consciously rather than just trying to escape from it. It means being willing to be vulnerable with others, to admit our struggles, to ask for help when we need it. It means being willing to serve others who are going through similar experiences, even when we don't feel completely healed ourselves. The medicine that emerges from this process isn't something we manufacture or create. It's something we discover was always there, waiting to be recognized. Our wounds become sacred because they crack us open in ways that reveal our true nature. They strip away our pretenses and defenses and force us to meet life with raw honesty. And in that honesty, we find a kind of authenticity that can touch others in provocative ways. When we understand that our personal suffering is actually connected to the suffering of all beings, everything changes. We stop feeling so sorry for ourselves and start feeling curious about our place in the larger web of existence. We begin to see that our individual pain is like a single note in a vast symphony of human experience, meaningful in itself, but part of something much larger and more beautiful. I realized this truth most clearly during my stroke recovery. At first, I felt isolated and alone, like I was the only person who had ever experienced such loss of function and identity. But as I connected with other stroke survivors, I discovered that my experience was part of a much larger pattern. Millions of people around the world were dealing with similar challenges. My struggle wasn't unique or special, it was universal. This recognition didn't minimize my pain, but it transformed my relationship to it. Instead of feeling like a victim of circumstances, I began to feel like a participant in the human condition. My suffering connected me to others who were struggling. My healing journey became a way of serving not just myself, but everyone who faces similar challenges. The web of suffering is also a web of healing. When we work with our own pain consciously, we're not just helping ourselves, we're contributing to the healing of the collective unconscious. Every time someone transforms their wound into wisdom, it makes it easier for others to do the same. Every time someone finds peace in the midst of chaos, it increases the amount of peace available to everyone. This understanding changes how we approach our difficulties. Instead of seeing them as personal problems to be solved, we can see them as opportunities to contribute to the healing of the world. Our individual struggles become sacred work, not because they're pleasant, but because they're part of the larger process of consciousness awakening to itself. The illusion of separation tells us that our pain is ours alone, that no one else can understand what we're going through, that we have to figure everything out by ourselves. But the truth is that we're all walking each other home. Every person who has ever lived has experienced loss, betrayal, disappointment, and fear. We're all members of the same club, the club of beings who have agreed to incarnate in human form and experience the full spectrum of what that means. But here's something beautiful that emerges from understanding our interconnectedness. When we serve others, we're not just helping them. We're participating in a form of prayer that dissolves the illusion of separation. Service becomes a way of recognizing that there is no other to serve. There's only one consciousness appearing as many, and when we reach out to help, we're actually loving ourselves in a different form. This realization transformed my entire approach to spiritual practice. For years, I had been meditating, studying, and seeking enlightenment as if it were something I could achieve for myself. But when I began to serve others, first through my teaching, then through the Siva Foundation and Light, or through simply being present with people who were suffering, I discovered that service was actually the most direct path to the very awakening I had been seeking. I remember the first time I visited a leper colony in India. I went thinking I was there to help these unfortunate people, to bring them some comfort and aid. But what happened was exactly the opposite. The lepers taught me about dignity in the face of unimaginable suffering. They showed me what it means to find joy even when your body is falling apart. They demonstrated a kind of acceptance that I had been trying to achieve through years of meditation. I went to serve, but I was the one who was served. This is the mystery of service. When we give with an open heart, we receive far more than we give. But it's not a transaction, it's a recognition. When we serve others, we're recognizing our fundamental unity. We're saying, your suffering is my suffering, your joy is my joy, your healing is my healing. This recognition dissolves the ego's sense of being separate and isolated. True service isn't about fixing people or solving their problems. It's about being present with them in their experience, offering whatever is needed in the moment. Sometimes that's practical help. Food, shelter, medical care. Sometimes it's simply the gift of presence, being with someone who is dying, listening to someone who is grieving, witnessing someone's pain without trying to take it away. After my stroke, I had to learn to receive service in ways that were completely new for me. I had been the helper, the teacher, the one who gave support to others. Suddenly, I needed help with basic tasks like eating and speaking. This forced me to understand service from the other side, what it means to gracefully receive the love and care of others. What I discovered was that receiving service with gratitude is actually a form of giving. When we allow others to help us, we're giving them the opportunity to experience their own compassion and generosity. We're participating in the same web of love, just from a different position. The person who serves and the person who receives service are both being blessed by the same divine energy. This understanding completely changed how I related to my own limitations and vulnerabilities. Instead of seeing them as weaknesses to be hidden or overcome, I began to see them as invitations for others to express their love. My stroke didn't just change my life, it gave everyone around me the opportunity to practice compassion and service. The deepest service happens when we realize that we're all wounded healers. Every person who has ever helped another human being has done so, not from a place of having it all figured out, but from a place of shared humanity. Our wounds don't disqualify us from serving others. They're actually what make our service authentic and powerful. I think about my own journey from Harvard psychologist to spiritual teacher to stroke survivor. At every stage, I was wounded in some way. In my academic phase, I was wounded by the meaninglessness of purely intellectual pursuit. In my psychedelic phase, I was wounded by the instability of chemical Y-induced states. In my spiritual teacher phase, I was wounded by the subtle pride of thinking I was more evolved than others. And in my stroke recovery phase, I was wounded by the loss of my former capabilities. But each of these wounds became a source of healing for others. My disillusionment with academia helped other intellectuals who were struggling with the same emptiness. My difficult experiences with psychedelics helped guide others who were exploring consciousness through similar means. My spiritual seeking helped countless people who were on their own path of awakening. And my stroke recovery has helped other people who are dealing with disability and loss. The wounded healer doesn't pretend to be beyond suffering. They don't claim to have all the answers. They simply share what they've learned from their own journey through difficulty. They offer their scars as evidence that healing is possible, their struggles as proof that others are not alone in their pain. This is why the most powerful healers are often those who have been through the deepest suffering. They can sit with someone else's pain without trying to fix it, because they know from their own experience that pain can be a teacher. They can offer hope without false optimism because they know that healing is possible even in the most difficult circumstances. The wounded healer understands that healing doesn't mean returning to some previous state of wholeness. It means integrating our wounds into a deeper understanding of what it means to be human. It means allowing our scars to become sources of wisdom and compassion. It means recognizing that our brokenness is actually what makes us whole. This recognition completely changes how we approach our own healing journey. Instead of trying to get rid of our wounds or pretend they don't exist, we can learn to work with them as allies in our growth. We can see our struggles not as obstacles to overcome, but as qualifications for service. We can understand that our pain connects us to others rather than isolating us from them. The wounded healer also understands that healing is not a solitary process. We heal in relationship with others through the love and support of community, through the recognition that we're all walking each other home. Our individual healing contributes to the healing of the collective, and the healing of the collective supports our individual journey. This brings us to perhaps the most beautiful truth of all. We're not just individual souls struggling alone in a hostile universe. We're all part of one consciousness, temporarily forgetting our unity so we can experience the joy of remembering it. We're all walking each other home to the realization that we never actually left home in the first place. The image of walking each other home has become central to how I understand the spiritual journey. We're all on the same path, even when it looks like we're going in different directions. We're all trying to remember who we really are, even when we're lost in the confusion of who we think we're supposed to be. And we're all here to help each other remember through our presence, our love, our willingness to be vulnerable and authentic. This doesn't mean that everyone is at the same place on the path. Some people are just beginning to question the reality they've been taught to believe. Others are in the middle of deep transformation. Still others are integrating their realizations into a life of service. But we're all on the same journey, and we all have something to offer each other. The person who is just beginning their spiritual journey has the gift of beginner's mind, fresh eyes, open heart, willingness to be surprised. The person who is in the middle of transformation has the gift of courage, the willingness to question everything, to let go of what no longer serves, to embrace uncertainty. The person who is integrating their realizations has the gift of wisdom, the ability to translate spiritual insights into practical love. What I've learned from my own journey is that we need each other at every stage. The beginner keeps the advanced practitioner humble and open. The person in transformation reminds everyone that change is possible. The wise elder provides guidance and perspective. We're all teachers and students simultaneously, all walking each other home.